And God gives it the name, the Valley of Hamon Gog. Gog, you understand, the leader of these forces as it's presented in Ezekiel. And Hamon means multitude. The Valley of the multitude of Gog, because they're all buried here in this huge cemetery. A mass burial if ever there was one. And not only do you have this valley in which they're killed, in which they're buried rather, being named the Valley of Hamon Gog, but there's a city just beside it. And it is called Hamonah. Again, same word as in Hamon Gog, meaning multitude. The city multitude beside the valley of the multitude slain that followed God. And even after that, they take 7 months to gather up all the dead bodies. With all of Israel, not just a few people, all the people going out for 7 months to bury these dead. Even after that, there's a lot of bodies that still remain unburied. And so the recruiting agency employs many people full-time to go up and down the land and locate unburied bodies that we missed. Because after all, there was only the whole country working for 7 months to locate and bury them. And we've missed some. Of course we have. There's so many of them. And then, because these men have such a huge task that they can't possibly see everywhere, anybody who happens to be making any sort of a journey through the land is instructed that if you see the bone of anybody who died in this battle with Gog and Magog, put a wee sign beside it. Hammer in a sign to make it easier to identify, so nobody touches that bone, by the way, and becomes unclean, and so that the buriers can find it and then put it into the valley of Hamon Gog. And again the question arises, have you, in all your reading of Scripture, ever come upon anything else like this in the Bible? Now doubtless there were burials of soldiers after the battles. You bury your own soldiers first and with much more dignity. And as for the enemy, you bury him too, not so much even out of respect for him, but because he will stink up your land. But here, 7 years they're burying. All Israel engaged in it. This huge burial plot. The valley of Hamon Gog with its own city called the Multitude, referring to those down in the valley who've been buried there. And even then, not enough to gather up all the dead. Men are employed weeks, months, years after to locate bodies and bury them. And little signs dotted around the country, hammered in. Here's another bone. You missed that one. Bury him too. And then we have the third image of the total destruction of Gog and Magog. We've seen that the wooden weapons became firewood. That disposes of them. We've seen that the dead bodies are carted away to the valley of Hamon Gog. But before this helps Israel with their disposal job too. Before this, the wild birds and beasts feasted on the corpses. God presents this as a sacrificial meal. The guests at this sacrificial meal are the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. The summons or invitation goes out to them. They all obey. They come. The wine at this feast is blood, and the food is human flesh and horse meat. And they gorge themselves until they're full. Does the Old Testament speak this way elsewhere? Yes, it does, in several places, including Zephaniah 1. But nowhere on this scale, nowhere on this scale, and nowhere along with 7 years of firewood with their weapons, and then a huge cemetery, the Valley of Hamon Gog. And I return to the dominant thought, this is unique in all the Old Testament. With the largest attacking army, including the least known nations from the furthest parts of the world, which army then receives the most terrible destruction anywhere in Old Testament scripture by earthquake, falling upon their own swords, disease, and then this downpour of water, huge amounts, hail, fire, and brimstone. Which then, given you've such a terrible army, huge, given that it's destroyed totally, which then of course requires the biggest and longest lasting clean-up operation ever. The birds and the beasts eat the slain soldiers and horses, stage 1. Then it takes all Israel 7 months to bury what remains, and then you get men working full-time to pick up the rest, being helped with passers-by, putting in little signs, look, here's a bone here, you missed this one. As well as that, we have the whole of Israel being supplied with firewood for 7 years from the weaponry of Gog and Magog. And we have 2 whole chapters dedicated to it in graphic detail. Now the question is, how are these things going to be fulfilled? Are we to take these things literally? I propose now to go through these 3 main images of destruction to show you that Ezekiel 39 itself indicates in various ways that this will not literally take place. Not literally. Though the reality to which it points, using Old Testament language, is far more terrible and awful than taking this literally. It's worse than literal. It's worse than if it would be if you just took it literally. Far worse. Let's consider then, first of all, the use of Gog and Magog's weaponry as fuel for Israel for 7 years. Verses 8 through 10. Think for a moment about the weaponry of these nations. These nations don't attack Israel with bomber or fighter planes. They don't come with tanks. They don't employ missiles. They haven't even got between them 1 machine gun. They've got bows and arrows and spears. Weapons made of wood and not even metal. And as I said last time on Ezekiel 38, it's no wonder they lose. No wonder. Israel today has one of the most sophisticated defense systems in all the world. And it has to, because it's surrounded by hostile nations who have attacked it before. And if Israel today were to be attacked with armies, no matter consisting of how many people, with weapons like bows and arrows and spears, as I said last time, it would be dead easy for them. The only possibility they would have is that Israel ran out of bullets or bombs. And so a literalistic reading of Ezekiel 38 and 39 would require that the military hardware of the future goes back centuries. The military hardware of the future would have to go back centuries. And this, mind you, even though communications between nations will improve, as they have to for globalization to continue, the military hardware in the future will go back centuries. So that we'll have computers and things far more complicated than that, and bows and arrows and staves.